Quite a busy day,
Oh, have you?
actually. I had to take my brother-in-law to an eye clinic. He's diabetic, and his
Okay.
wife is not very mobile or well. In fact, she's gone to see another specialist this
Right.
evening, brother-in-law. And then I was on a Zoom meeting actually with WAC
Oh, did
retired.
you?
This just happened to be the same day as today. So we had on from 11 o'clock until 1 o'clock. So
Right.
lovely to see some of my old missionary friends,
Oh,
mostly from England and
yeah.
from Scotland. Mhm.
Oh, that's a treat. So you actually have
From
family
Ireland.
in you have family in Canada.
Yes, 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 yes. My brother-in-law and cousins and nieces and nephews in Vancouver and
Ah,
Edmonton.
okay. But have you ever been to Canada?
Oh, yes, when my sister was alive, we used to go to visit her on a regular, well, fairly regular basis. Went to see her when her daughter was married and when she was ill and just
Yeah.
before she died, then went to see her.
Okay.
Her worked in Surrey General Hospital, if you know it.
A
And
little bit, yeah.
uh, okay.
Okay. So you've been to that Vancouver kind of west coast of Canada area.
Yes, yes. I have a cousin also who lives in Seattle. So we
Oh, okay.
border down to Seattle as well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm actually from Ontario in Canada, so I haven't lived in British
Okay.
Columbia for that long.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so Maud, I wanted to share a little bit of this Zoom call with our Emmanuel church family in Vernon. So I'm wondering if you can give a little wave and a little greeting to all of our church family here at Emmanuel.
Hello, it's just lovely to greet you all from Ireland and the warmest greetings, although it's not very warm outside today. Warmest greetings from Ireland and from the Democratic Republic of Congo, because half of my heart is in Congo as well as here in Ireland.
Okay, thanks so much, Maud. And then I had a couple of questions that I was going to ask you. So one of the ones is that I wondered is what is the food that you actually miss most from the Congo?
Well, it probably you under most people from other countries don't really understand it because I think it's only the Congolese maybe and other Africans who eat it. It's the cassava leaf and the cassava root, and the cassava leaf they mix it with palm oil and sometimes a little bit of hot peppers and peanut butter, and I just love it. And then so that's the leaves, and then the root of it looks like a parsnip, but more in the line of a potato. And we would eat the two together. But
Right,
I think it's because you don't get it anywhere else. It's
right,
food that has to be eaten fresh.
for sure. Okay, so one
Yeah.
of the questions that we are wondering is what is, or can you share with us one of the highlights of your missionary time in the Congo?
And I was thinking about this because there were so many highlights and
I'm
so many
sure.
dramatic, exciting things that happened. But I would think one of the most encouraging and I still look back on it as a wonderful experience. It was we had been evacuated because of war situation, and I had been in South Sudan, come back to Congo, and at Christmas time we always have a big open air meeting where we invite the village people who wouldn't go near church or the pagan people who wouldn't come near a church come along, and it was the Christmas of 2022, and I'd been asked to speak at it. And after I'd spoken at it, then the pastor who was leading the service asked if anybody would like to come forward to get saved and to come to know the Lord. And usually you'd maybe have a couple of old ladies or maybe even younger girls, ladies, but very rarely men. But these young men started coming forward, and
Oh,
and not only that, they didn't just come forward quietly, but they were crying out to God for
mhm.
and for salvation. And then their ladies joined them. And I remember in particular, there was one lady, and she was heavily pregnant, and she fell to the ground, and the Holy Spirit just threw her to the ground, and she was crying out to God for
Mm.
salvation. And I was sitting beside an old midwife when who had been in Congo during the revival in the 1950s. And I thought I was really concerned about this lady falling to the ground with her pregnancy. And this old African midwife said to me, Mademoiselle, let her be. God will look after
Mm.
her. And that was such a lesson to me. And of course, she was perfectly all right. And we had over 100 people came forward, and really the Holy Spirit really got hold of them. I'd never been in an experience like that before or since. I've been in meetings when people have come forward to get right with God, but nothing supernatural like that.
Oh man.
Full experience.
Yeah. So one of the stories that I actually did not share with our Emmanuel Church family is your white coat experience.
Yes.
So you just mentioned there briefly about how you were evacuated. Would you tell us that little story? You had to be evacuated quite quickly.
Yes, that's correct. Because we were actually, again, how wonderfully how the Lord works things together for good. Our field leader had decided we should have a missionary conference. And so all of us missionaries were together in the field leader's mission station when suddenly war was declared. And we had no means of evacuating because the MAF pilots had already evacuated, and they were the usual ones who would have evacuated us in a hurry. But we did have radio communication with the missionaries in Nairobi, and they told us if we could get permission from the state for a plane to land, they would come in and evacuate us. We went 2 or 3 times, well, a few times, to ask for permission, and they would not give us permission. So after a fortnight, the missionaries in Nairobi said, even though you don't have permission for a plane to land, we're coming in to get you. We can't land where you are because that airstrip's mined. You have to go to another airstrip place called Nebabongo, which was 77 kilometers away. We got there by various means, only to find a very hostile group of people there who were shouting insults at us and rolled barrels on the airstrip to prevent the plane landing, called us the enemy. So we couldn't wait for the plane to land. We had been in contact with the pilot who had said, be on the airstrip 10:30, we're landing at 20 to 11, and bring nothing heavier than 5 kilos, a small 5-kilo bag. So we were there waiting patiently for this plane to land because of all this hostile group of people around us. But 20 to 11 came and went and no plane. 10 to 11, 11 o'clock, 10 past 11, 20 past 11, 11:30, 20 to 12, an hour later, no plane. By this time, we were met together in groups of 2s and 3s and 4s, praying for God's deliverance, because we knew that we were in great danger. And of course, we knew what had happened to missionaries in the 1964 rebellion, where a lot were martyred. And so we were waiting and praying, and it went on until it was almost 12 o'clock. And just a minute or so before it, we thought we heard a plane. And of course, our eyes were up to the sky. Sure enough, there were 2 planes, because there were 19 of us, a group of Wycliffe missionaries and a group of WEC missionaries. And the pilots had told us, if it's safe, put a white sheet on the ground. Now, we put 2 white sheets on the ground, but almost immediately that hostile group of people around the airstrip ran onto the airstrip, pulled the sheets away. The pilots saw this and thought that meant that they weren't allowed to land, because they thought this is a signal to say we leave. But one of the Wycliffe missionaries saw me with a little white coat. I'd just put on this white jacket. It was far too hot for it, but it was because we were told to get on the plane quickly. And I was taking this because I knew when I get to Ireland, it would be cold. So I wanted to bring this white jacket with me. So I just put it on when the pilots were overhead. But one of the Wycliffe missionaries shouted at me, Maud, give us your white jacket. Maud, give us your white jacket. So I pulled the white jacket off and just threw it on the ground. And one of the pilots saw it, and he signaled to the other pilot to come in to land. And for the first plane landed was for the Wycliffe missionaries. The second one was for the WEC missionaries. For both planes to land, it took exactly 7 minutes. For ours to land, it took exactly 3 minutes. So you can imagine we didn't have time to put on seatbelts. We were very tense, of course, stressed, tears dripping us. And with a co-pilot was pulling us into the plane, and the pilot he didn't turn off the engine. As soon as we were in, he closed the door and off we went. And we're still putting on our seatbelts while we were in the air. And now we thought we were going straight to Nairobi, but actually we landed in Entebbe in Uganda. And we wondered why we landed. The first person I saw from the other plane was one of the Wycliffe missionaries with my white jacket.
Oh.
Oh my goodness, where did you get that? He said it was tripping me as I was getting on our plane. So I still have the white jacket, the real white jacket. And then the pilots came along and told us what had happened. He said that they were actually on their way to get us at the original rendezvous, was 20 to 11. But while they were on their way, the rebels in Congo got their radio frequency and contacted them and told them not to go in to get us. If they went in to get us, they would either bomb the plane and take off, or they would take us all hostage, and that they were not to go in to get us. Well, when the pilots heard that, they didn't know what to do, but they decided it was too dangerous. And so they were actually on their way back to Nairobi. But the Americans had satellite surveillance of what was going on the ground in Congo, as well as what was happening to our pilots. And so they could see the rebels were actually coming to take us hostage. So they contacted the pilots and told them they had to turn around again and go and get us. If they didn't get us out that day, we would never get out, because they were intent on taking us hostage, and the Lord knows what they were planning to do with us. So it was reassuring to know that the pilots had risked their lives to come in to get us. And that was why they did no time on the ground at all. As soon as possible, we were just on the airstrip, into the plane, and off we went. Now, just to finish or round off the story, after that, of course, we went to Nairobi, where I came back home to Ireland. Actually went out to Canada at that stage. I think the niece was getting married in Vancouver, and went on out to a friend of mine paid for me to go out to my niece's wedding. And then it was too dangerous to go back into Congo. But I was asked by Samaritan's Purse to help out in southern Sudan. Well, that was a bit like going out of the frying pan into the fire. But I went out anyhow, and I was there for about 2 years, and eventually got back to the Congo. So one of my first questions when I got back was, what happened after we left? And I was told there were actually 2 vehicles coming to take us hostage. And one of them got a flat tire, and they didn't have a spare wheel. And the second one had a breakdown, and I think it was the timing belt had gone in the engine, and they couldn't get it repaired. So God really answered our prayers as we were met together in those groups of 2s and 3s and 4s. And it was just wonderful, just how God so wonderfully intervenes just when we need him, and answers prayers in ways we would never even dream of.
And so what year was that you were evacuated?
That was
that
98.
98, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so then as you share these stories with me, and I know it's hard, but what would you say is one lesson, or a big lesson, that God taught you while you're out in the mission field?
I think it was always to keep our eyes on him. It's really a lesson that we all learn in our Christian pathway, to seek first his kingdom and righteousness. I think that's the most important. It was actually just before I went to Congo that the Lord really brought this home to me. I was actually in France with OM doing a bit of door-to-door work, and another sister of mine was getting married, and I had to go home for her wedding a few days before the group. And normally OMers always travel together in a big lorry, but I wasn't doing that. So you had to ask for money whenever they pool all their money. And I had put all the money that I had with me into the pool when I first went over to England and then over to France. But then coming back, I had to ask them for money again. And I only wanted to ask the very minimum amount of money. I wanted to leave the rest with OM. And so I worked out the cheapest possible way to get back to Ireland. And it meant getting a midnight flight in London from London to Belfast. And when I got to the airport, and I was there quite early, and I asked to be put on the standby list, and they said, "Oh, it's already full up. You'll not get on tonight." And the lady at the check-in desk, she was very insistent I wouldn't get on, but I was very insistent she put my name down, and she did eventually. And then I went and just sat down. It was about 3-4 hours before the flight, and I got out my Bible and I began to read my Bible. And, I just read again that story in Matthew 6 and Luke 6 as well, about seek first the God's kingdom and his right, and all these other things that we're concerned about will be added on. And it just came home to me, that God brought it home to me just there when I was sitting at the airport, what it was to forget about everything else. I had to forget my anxiety about getting a plane that night, to forget about everything, just center upon him, the Lord Jesus. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and just to seek to honor him in my thoughts and my prayers, and just to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And that wasn't easy there in the middle of the airport to do that. But I did, and I continued to read scriptures, but that was foremost in my mind, seeking first his kingdom. And eventually, when it came about 15 minutes before the plane was going, I went to the check-in desk, and of course there were crowds of people around it, all wanting to get on the plane. And I asked if my name was on it. They said, oh, well, they haven't called out. The pilot hasn't called out how many seats he's left. And then eventually I was standing there, and the pilot did call out, I can take 5 more passengers. So they called out the names. And of course, you know where my name was, the very 5th one. And so I was able to get on the plane. Quite a lot of luggage, because we were camping with OM. So I had a bed tent and various other things. And I thought, I need to get all this weighed. And the plane was about to take off. And the assistant said to me, we don't have time to weigh all that luggage. Take all that stuff onto the plane with you. About to take off. And within 5 minutes, we were taking off. And I was carrying this tent and this sleeping bag and all the rest of it. And we took off, and I arrived. Yes, the end of the story was I arrived in Ireland, and my mother was meeting with a very good Christian friend. And this Christian friend actually drove her car to the airport and dropped my mother and me off at the foot of our lane. And whenever they were leaving me off, this friend gave me an envelope. She said, my brother gave this to me for you. And in the envelope was enough fees for my last term at Bible college. And I had no money, of course, for college, because I'd given it all to OM. But the Lord had provided. And there, not only did I have enough to get back to Ireland, but enough for my last term at Bible college. So it's wonderful, just seeking first. And that's always been right throughout all my missionary journey, just to put God first in every situation, no matter what, always seeking first his kingdom and seeking to glorify him in every situation. And that was the other secret, and how important it was to keep and guard a quiet time every day. And sometimes, I was called out at night, didn't get much sleep, but I still found it was very important, always to have a quiet time and just have that space of time with the Lord. And I think that was my secret, guarding a quiet time with the Lord every day, no matter how busy I was, always putting him first.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fun to hear what God taught you. So one of the other things that I had chatted with you about was, what message do you think the church in Melita would give a North American church? I know it's hard because you're not in North America, but you had talked about maybe you were going to email your friends in the Congo and ask them. Did you get a little message from them?
Yeah, but it was really an answer I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
A lovely, godly Christian man, and he's a head of the university, or he's a general secretary of the university, and they're one of the godliest men I know on this earth. And I thought he'll give me some very deep theological message. But all that, what he was telling me, he just said, don't get involved in all this controversies, these gender controversies with lesbians, gays, sections, have nothing to do with those controversies, but seek only to study the Bible and look to the Bible for guidance. And I thought, how am I going to share that? But it is true. I mean, I'm sure your church teaching that all the time, just going by what the Bible teaches. I think another big lesson is that they could be teaching, because they're so poor. They don't have social aid, they don't have supermarkets, they don't have anything. If they don't have a garden and plant a garden, have a growing garden continuously the year round, they wouldn't survive, because they don't have food, they don't have food banks, they don't have social security, don't have anything like that. So they depend on their gardens. And so they just depend on God for everything. And whatever they need, they just pray to God, and they expect God to answer. and God will bring an answer, and He does, and it's just amazing how He does.
Yeah.
Supply their needs.
Yeah.
Sure, whatever their needs are, be it spiritual need, be it a physical need, be it a practical need.
Yeah.
Just turn to the Lord about it. They just pray all the time about all their needs.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big things.
Yeah, and that's a really good reminder for sure. So you were actually in the Congo is it just a year ago?
Well, yeah, I went out last February 22. I came back in April 22.
Okay.
Yes.
So what were you doing at that time?
Well, and mainly because it's so difficult to get supplies out there. We've built a little hospital, as you know, and we built a little school. And of course, they're always needing supplies and the medical supplies. I try to train them. The medical supplies that I bring out, that they sell them to the patients, keep the money they get for that to buy more medicines. Never works out because the people are so poor and there's patients coming in dying and they have to give them medicine. So I bring out a large supply of medicines and hope that will keep them going until eventually I do get out again. And also solar panels. Right, when I first went out, there's no electricity of any, still no electricity. And we just used little lamps and torches. That's all we ever used when I first went out. But over the years, I've brought in solar panels and laptops and things like that. But even out there in the tropics, they get tropical storms. And about 2 months ago now, they had a horrific tropical storm. And lightning hit my house, the house that I used to live in, which the church now uses as an office, and destroyed the solar panels and came right through to the laptops and printers and just the equipment that they needed for office work for the hospital and the school and the church. So that was a big loss, losing all the equipment. But gradually, I've been able to send out a little bit of aid to them, so they've been able to replace a few of the items. But here, this last Saturday, didn't I have another phone call from the head pastor to say they had another terrific tropical storm, which did more damage. It actually lifted the roof off the maternity unit. Left the mothers and babies without a roof over their head. And I think they were delivering a baby at the time. And it just everything, it just happened. The roof lifted right off the maternity unit. So that's been a big issue. So I've got different, because I speak at meetings and people give me money. So of course I gather up a bit of money. Now I have money ready to send out. My problem is getting it out to them. I usually sent it out via Western Union. But Western Union have blocked my account for some reason. Suspicious of anybody who sends out money on a regular basis. I think it's fraudulent or corrupt or something. So I'm just praying that they'll release my account. They'll unblock the blockage and allow me to send money out so we can get this maternity unit fixed up, put a roof on over their heads. And so there's always something dramatic happening to test our faith. Challenges. God always allows us challenges, but it's wonderful to prove Him. And they're difficult going through them, but it's just wonderful to see how He so wonderfully answers prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had written to you a little bit about how I've been sharing just a little 5-minute segment of your story over the last number of weeks. And I think what's super fun is at our church, we do tell missionary stories on a regular basis. And in the summer, we have ice cream and we tell a missionary story. And I would have to say this, typically the stories that we tell are people who have passed on already. And so it has been a real encouragement to chat with you and to show some of our young people and even some of our own people of our church to know that like God is still working now and in big ways all across the globe. So what would you say to some of our young people at our church today?
And I think one of the most important things is just keep on keeping on, no matter what difficulties and problems you come across. Because in a marathon, if you're running a marathon, there are always obstacles there that you have to overcome. And you will. Life is like that. Life isn't one smooth run. It's like a journey. And it's like a road that there are ups and downs, there are hills, there are valleys, there are crooked and difficult corners to maneuver. And there are all these difficulties. But if we just keep our eyes on the Lord and keep on going on, no matter how difficult the road. I don't know if you've shared with the church about my shooting incident. I don't know if you want me to share a wee bit about it.
You know what? This coming Sunday, I'm going to share that little segment. So, but I would love for you to tell a little bit about that story.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I had been back in Congo, and one Sunday evening I'd been preaching in the church, and then rested in the afternoon, walked down the airstrip, and went to bed. And about midnight, I don't have glass on my windows there, just have shutters. And about midnight, there was a rap on my shutters, and it was one of the midwives to say that there was a lady in labour, and they would like my advice about her. And I asked a little bit more about her, and she had had 3 babies before. She was expecting her 4th baby, and I asked how she was. They said, yes, she was okay. What about the baby? Yes, the baby was okay. I said, well, if everything, and I asked if there was a nurse surgeon who could do a cesarean section if necessary, and they said yes. So I said, well, if everything's okay and everything's progressing normally, you go ahead. I'll not go out, because when I'm back in Ireland, they don't have me to consult anyhow. So I said, you just go ahead, but if there are any problems, don't hesitate to come and call me. So the nurse, she went back and she told the nurse surgeon to go ahead with the cesarean section. And so I settled down to go to sleep. And about 15 minutes later, it was just sort of dozing off again, another rap on the windows. And I said, I answered, and this man's voice said, Mademoiselle, you're needed immediately in the maternity. I said, it's okay. I've already dealt with that problem. But he said, Mademoiselle, it's very urgent. The woman's in great distress. You really need to go. I said, look, I've already dealt with that problem, but he was very insistent. I thought he was the father of the husband of the woman who was to have the cesarean section. So he was very insistent. So I said, okay, I'll go to the maternity. Now, the front door was right beside my bedroom, but I didn't go out that door because during the war, they lost the key. It was a very good lock, a really big, strong lock, but the key was lost, so I could never come in from the outside. So I had to go to the back door, which was really God's guidance as it transpired. I'll explain later as we get on. So I went to the back, and my night guard was there, and he'd heard me talking. And he said, Mademoiselle, have you to go to the hospital? I said, yes. And he said, well, I'm coming with you. So we went to the maternity, and I met a group of people, and I said, what's going on? What's the problem? And they said, they looked at me strangely and didn't answer. And I asked again, what's the problem? And they said, we have no problem. But I said, this man called me. No, well, it wasn't. I said, where's the husband of the lady's having the cesarean section? So they said, a man, he must be in the operating theatre. So we think he was in the operating theatre. So I said to the night guard, we'll go back to the house because I'm not needed here. So he went back. We went back to the house. And as we were just going up around this, it was quite a wee distance to my house. And then we went in through the back fence and round the side of the house to go to the back door. And these 2 bandits came running round from the back of the house, both wearing masks and camouflage clothing, weeds and reeds and all sorts of things over them. And one of them grabbed my night guard and ran off with him. And the other one pointed a gun at me just like that, great big gun. And I froze at first. And then I thought, he's not getting the better of me. So I went to grab the gun. And as I went to grab the gun, he pulled the trigger. And as he pulled the trigger, of course, this enormous noise, enormous bang, and a very severe pain in my shoulder. He actually shot two shots through my shoulder here, and they came out my back. The Lord was very gracious to me because where they came out, they actually fractured 2 ribs on the process and partially destroyed 2 vertebrae. And how they didn't destroy my spinal cord, I still to this day don't know. And anybody who looks at my back, because I still have a huge big hole in my back, 2 tiny little holes at the front, where the bullets went in, but big hole where the bullets came out at the back. And of course, it was bleeding furiously. So I pressed my back firmly against the wall and started calling for help. But nobody came. Everybody was terrified to come out because they heard me shouting. They heard the gunfire. So I'm sure it was up to 10 minutes I was shouting for help. And eventually my little night guard came along and he said, look, madam, I'll go and call the pastor, etc. Which he did. And very soon a lot of people then were surrounding me and helping to carry me into the house. And then they had to call for, because we were about, I had a satellite phone, no one else had a phone. It was about 30 miles to our nearest mobile phone. So they had, and we hadn't a vehicle. My Land Rover was stolen, so we had no vehicle. So there was only bicycles, but then they got a motorbike and somebody was able to go the 30 miles to the nearest town and then contact the pilots, the math pilots, because I knew I needed evacuating to a proper hospital. So it was wonderful because on their way to the town, they met the chief who had got the news of what had happened, and he had a pickup vehicle. Was able to help to get to there the last minute. So the message got through to MAF, who contacted then our church leaders, and but MAF couldn't come immediately because there was a mist on the ground. It was really a very foggy morning, and also a German doctor and his friend and his wife, who were very good friends of mine, who worked in another mission station at Nebabongo, said they were getting blood arranged because they'd heard I'd lost a lot of blood, and they got my blood group, and they were getting blood, and they wanted to bring that down to give me this blood. So the MAF had to go to collect them at their mission station and then come to me. So it actually was near midday by the time they got to me. It was nearly 12 hours. By that time, I was completely unconscious because I'd lost so much, but I was still breathing. And, so they brought the blood and put it up and worked on me for about an hour. Apparently, I have no recollection of this at all. I was unconscious, but they eventually got me on a stretcher, got me on the plane, and got me up to this other big hospital on the Uganda border, about a 2-hour flight. And by the time I got there with the blood and the resuscitation, I was back. I was conscious again. So, and then they very lovingly, the MAF pilots and the wives all very lovingly cared for me. But it was just wonderful how the Lord just cared for me in just a miraculous way. When I came home, I had various interviews. One was with a very non-Christian radio journalist. And he said to me, if your God's as wonderful as you say he was, why did he allow that to happen to you? Well, I had just been reading that morning about Daniel in the lion's den. So I was able to say to him, well, why did God allow Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den? Wasn't it to show his mighty, victorious power in lifting Daniel out of that lion's den without even a scratch? And what a miracle and what a story. And we still have that story today because God is a God of miracles. God did a wonderful miracle saving my life. Not only saving my life, but preventing me from being paralyzed from the chest down. And so it's all glory to him. And so it's just a wonderful story just of how even out there, and even when I got home, I was still able to use it to God's glory.
Yeah.
That was the important thing.
What year was it that you were shot?
2015.
2015. Okay. Maud, it has been a pretty big treat to be able to chat with you today. Thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate that.
Well, that's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah. And the people, I just have the way that I'm telling your story is just 5 minutes each Sunday for 5 Sundays. So it's been very short little snippets, but people have really been encouraged by your story. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah. And if they want the book, of course, there is a book. I'm sure you've read the book yourself.
I have. Yeah, I've been.
An open door.
Yeah. And actually,
anybody wants to more stories that are in the book.
Yeah. I really, and then I've read the children's version as well. Of your story. So I'm using it right now, but I'm gonna pass it on to anyone who would like enjoy reading your story and hearing about what God has done. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. It's just lovely to hear from you. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to our Faith Mission prayer meeting. I
Oh,
go
are
to a
you?
prayer meeting every Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Which in which in which where are where in
In
Cookstown?
Cookstown, where I live.
Okay.
is
Okay.
County
Yeah.
Tyrone, just the heart of Northern Ireland.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's really neat. So, do you mind if I
Not
just
too
pray?
far from Portadown. Your husband comes from Portadown. She's not too
Yeah.
far.
Yeah. He was born in Portadown, and then his parents lived in Coleraine for a while.
Oh,
So
Coleraine, I know Coleraine,
so
yeah.
I've been over a few times, but I would have to say that my geography of Northern Ireland is not so good. So I'll have to, I'll have to look it up.
Well, Paul Atchison's parents, of course, live in Coleraine.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm going to share what's so interesting is that the night that you were sharing at Paul and Sharon's church was the very first night I started your story at our church here in Vernon, in Canada. So I just think it was neat the way that God that worked those pieces together. So that was neat. And then I actually had a chance to watch that service with Paul and Sharon. So that was neat to hear a little bit about what you've been doing the last little bit.
Oh, well, that was lovely.
Yeah.
It's amazing how the Lord brings all these things
I
together.
know. Yeah.
To
Yeah.
His glory.
Yeah, it is. Anyways, can I just pray with you for a minute and then
Yes, please.
we get Heavenly Father, I'm just so grateful for Maud and her faithful testimony of what you have done in her life. I thank you for her faithful witness. I thank you for the lesson of keeping our eyes on you. And I thank you for the way that you protected and led and guided and just helped her in every situation. God, I just pray that those stories of you working would be an encouragement and a blessing to us today and to believers around the world. God, we want to give you all the honor and all the praise. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you for letting me interrupt your tea time here. So
oh, no. Oh, it's finished.
I appreciate that. Enjoy your prayer meeting in the morning.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's just really lovely. The Lord really bless you all.
Take care, Maud.
Thank you. Bye-bye.